In this week's podcast, we have 3 short mini messages about Joseph, shepherds, and wise men. Our first mini message is by Callum, where he talks about Joseph.
When I was first approached to talk today about things that we can learn from characters in the nativity, I was a bit unsure on who to choose. Because over the years, we've heard many Christmas talks looking at the nativity story, and I wanted to look at a character that we don't really look at that often. That's why I wanted to look at Joseph. For those of you that don't know, Joseph was the earthly father of Jesus. I feel like that's common knowledge by now. And was a carpenter by trade. He was a descendant of David, and before Jesus was born, he was pledged to marry Mary, as we read in Matthew 1, verse 18. Throughout the Christmas story, Joseph goes on quite the emotional roller coaster. So, firstly, he finds out that the woman he's pledged to marry, who is a virgin, is pregnant. Now, I don't know how you would react to that news, but I feel like for me, I would probably be a bit broken-hearted, maybe a bit angry, betrayed, confused at what on earth Mary's on about, and not really trusting her with what she's saying. Maybe she wasn't the person that I thought she was. I think that's quite likely how Joseph was feeling at that time upon hearing the news, but despite this, despite all these emotions, he showed kindness to her. In Matthew 1 verse 19 we read, "Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly." There'd never been a virgin birth before, so I think it's quite natural for Joseph to doubt Mary's explanation and to presume adultery. And that would bring about a lot of shame for Mary. But despite all this, Joseph showed kindness by having in mind to quietly divorce her and to protect her from public shame. And I think this says a lot about Joseph, really. And it models a Christ-like response to betrayal. Showing kindness and grace leaves the door open for the wrongdoer to repent and to be restored to God. Despite the hurt that Joseph was likely feeling, he had in mind to show love and kindness, which are both fruits of the Spirit that we read in Galatians 5. So the first lesson I have for you today that we can learn from Joseph is to be kind even when it's hard. It's to try to look past our own feelings and ask, what would Jesus do? Joseph didn't have Christ's example, but we do. Next, upon thinking these things about divorcing Mary quietly, an angel appears to Joseph and explains that he can trust Mary and he doesn't need to fear. The angel says in Matthew 1:21 that Mary will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. Beautiful. The baby that Mary was carrying was God's son. If you take a step back, that's a really, really, really big thing. So what was Joseph feeling? Well, one, he's just seen an angel, which is probably both really, really scary and really, really cool and awesome. Two, Joseph has just been told that he'll be the earthly father to the Son of God, which is fulfilling prophecy, which I think is a massive blessing and privilege, but also a massive responsibility at the same time. And he also had to raise a child that was not specifically his own, and he might have felt like he wasn't really in control of what was going on in his life. Again, it's another whole bag of emotions, and yet despite this, Joseph showed courage to trust God when life didn't make any sense. I think it's almost impossible to rationalize what was going on at that time. He had courage to look past his fears about Mary and the emotions of feeling betrayed to take up new responsibility to raise the Son of God. I don't know about you, but it can take a lot of courage to speak to an employee at a shop to ask for help, yet alone raise the Son of God. In verse 24 of Matthew, we read, "When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him and took Mary home as his wife." So what can we learn from this? Well, trusting God takes courage, especially when life doesn't make any sense. And finally, from this, we see that God was with Joseph the whole time, every step of the way, providing guidance. We not only see here that the angel instructed him, but also later in the story when they flee Bethlehem to go to Egypt in Matthew 2, verse 13. What did Joseph need to do? He needed to trust God and obey him. God's ways might seem really confusing at times. Why did God not tell Joseph that Mary would be having a child before he found out she was pregnant? Because surely that would have saved all the emotions and feelings of betrayal. Why did God not warn Joseph about leaving before the middle of the night so they could plan and pack? What we need to remember is, as Isaiah says, that God's ways aren't our ways. They're better. And so is his timing. God told Joseph what he needed to do when he needed, not before. And that can be really, really challenging. But God often does the same for us, tells us what we need to know when we need to know it, and often not before. We might look back and see how perfect his plan was, though. So from this, we can learn that we need to trust God and listen and obey his advice because he has the best plans. We might not get all the information we need right away, but he will always be there to support and guide us when we need him. So, looking forward to the new year, we need to be like Joseph and show kindness when it's hard to do so. Trust God and have courage when life doesn't make much sense. I need to listen to his advice and obey him because he's got the best advice. I just pray that these thoughts will be with us as we enter the new year. Thank you for listening.
Our second mini message is by Paul. He does refer to a video, however, we've been unable to include it as part of the podcast.
So, I'm going to be talking today about shepherds. Don't really know much about shepherds. I know a little bit more now. I know quite a lot about German shepherds because I've had one, but that's not quite the same, is it? So, why choose shepherds? Well, I've done a little bit of investigation in they're good leaders, aren't they? We normally associate shepherds with sheep, but one day coming down the Troodos Mountains in Cyprus, I came across a herd of goats and they were following a shepherd, but it was a goat shepherd. So I had to wait for them to move out of the way. And of course, we've got celebrity shepherds as well, haven't we? Amanda Owen has had her own TV show and probably laid a lot of the money out of it. We've also had Shaun the Sheep as well, haven't we? That's kind of right up there with Wallace and Gromit for the younger ones anyway. And I know when Wayne was here a few months ago, he was telling, Wayne from SGA, that is, was telling you that his wife was a shepherdess. And that was quite interesting because we go to Yorkshire quite a lot and there's lots of sheep there, to be perfectly honest. But when Jesus was born, things were very, very different. No television. So can we just have this little video just to put us into perspective? Thanks, Sam. It doesn't matter. I'll carry on without it. I can just kind of explain what happened. It's, parking your donkey at the supermarket as you do. And some of the problems they had because all the donkeys looked the same. And then he had to come out and use his keyless invention to find out where his donkey was. And you thought that was a new thing with cars, didn't you? A keyless invention. So it was obviously done a long while ago. Anyway, let's get back to what we're talking about today, which is shepherds. And I just want to tell you a little bit about the shepherds in Jesus' day. Well, they were outcasts. Weren't particularly liked. Not very well educated. Smelly. Dealing with all the sheep and everything that goes with them. They were thieves. They was also very strong. And they were also very brave. Because it tells us in the Old Testament, David was a shepherd before he became a king. And we read there that he fought lions and bears. So I've got a lion here. Okay, there's a lion if you don't know what it looks like. And I've also got a bear. It's a very sad bear, actually. And if you want to come and have a look at him later, you can do. He's a Titanic bear. So he shouldn't really come out the house. But they're not the sort of people that you'd have wanted to mess with, these shepherds, because You just didn't want to meet them in a dark alley or anything like that, let alone the bears and the lions. But we all know the part that the shepherds played in Jesus' birth, don't we? Because we sing the carol, while shepherds watch their flocks by night. But I just wondered, one of the gifts that they gave to the Lord Jesus, and they gave him a lamb. So I wondered whether they really understood what that meant, giving a lamb to the Lamb of God. Because we all know that in Old Testament times, lambs were sacrificed to God for the sins of the people. So I just want to read a couple of, well, it's a verse from Isaiah, if you just bear with me while I find it and focus. And this is what it says in Isaiah 53:6. We are like sheep, we've all gone astray. We have turned every one to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. We'll find out a little bit about the hymn in a moment. But we're now being described as sheep. We all know what that's like, don't we, with sheep? They just want to do their own thing. And so do we. So who's this him then? Can we have the first photo, please? I'm just going to read a few verses from John 10 and 7. Then Jesus said to them again, most assuredly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. Or in some translations, it does say the gate. And also in 9 of that same chapter, I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved, and he will go in and out and find new pastures. And also moving on from that, can we have the second photo? And again in John 10, verse 11, I am the good shepherd. That's the hymn now. So we're the sheep. This is the shepherd. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for his sheep. And then again in 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and I am known. I know my sheep. Sorry, I'll say that again. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and I am known by my own. So if you're a sheep today that's been saved and you know Jesus, my question to you today is, do you know this shepherd? Because he knows you, and you have an opportunity to come and meet that shepherd.
Right, last mini message this morning is about the wise men. And we read about them in Matthew chapter 2. And while there are only 12 verses written about them, there are things to learn. Colin spoke on Christmas morning. I was like, oh, he's chosen the wise men. But it was okay. And he asked, the wise man asked the question, where is he? And we read that the wise men first went to Herod, who was king at the time, to ask. And in verse 2 it says, and they asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. And we often look to the obvious for the answers. And the obvious place to find a king would be in Jerusalem in the palace. But often with God, we need to look for the less obvious. And a few examples from the Bible are Abraham. He was an old man when he was told he would become the father of nations. Moses had a speech impediment, but was chosen to speak in front of Pharaoh. David was chosen to be king, and he was the youngest of all his brothers. Fishermen, tax collectors, a zealot were all chosen by Jesus to be his disciples. Paul killed many Christians, but he went on to become an apostle and wrote from prison to many, many people about Jesus. And Jesus was an ordinary man who would save the world. Many things about God cannot make sense to us, and so to find answers from God, we have to look to where things don't make sense to us or even to others. But if we try and look from God's perspective, it will make perfect sense. For it says in Isaiah, if you were listening earlier, you will know, 55 verses 8 and 9, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Another lesson to learn is that the wise men did not meet Jesus as a baby, but as a child. Matthew 2:11 says, "On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh." The shepherds heard and met Jesus the same night he was born. They were his first visitors. But the wise men met Jesus when he was a little older, a child. And for some people, it can take a little longer for them to meet Jesus. For many of us here at church, we met or knew of Jesus from an early age, being brought up in Christian homes. But not everyone has that. The encouraging thing is that the wise men found Jesus, even though they took a detour to start with. And there is hope for anyone you are praying for to find Jesus. And this can be really hard when it feels like nothing has changed. But don't give up praying. Romans 12:12 tells us, "Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer." And 1 Thessalonians 5:17 tells us, "Pray continually." And then the last little lesson is, in trying to find Jesus, the wise men followed the star. Matthew 2:9-10 says, "After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed." It took a lot of faith to follow that star. They had to believe this star was important, they had the right one, and that it would take them to Jesus. I want to ask, what are we or have we been following? Are we following the star? Is it taking us to Jesus or something else that has become more important? We may need a reset and to find the star, to follow in faith like the wise men, and find Jesus more often. He is the one we can look to in both the good and the bad, especially the bad. Last Sunday, I went to church with Mum and Dad, and they sang the carol, "As with gladness, men of old." And the first verse says, "As with gladness, men of old did the guiding star behold. As with joy they hailed its light, leading onward beaming bright. So most gracious Lord, may we evermore be led to thee." Jesus is the light we can look to in the darkness. And I hope and pray that we can be led to him more as we start a new year tomorrow. In John 8:12, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life."